welcome to Information Please, your Peoria Public Library on the air. We bring you information about your library and your community. This evening, my guest is Chris Vallillo, who we're very honored to have coming to the library on June 7th for a very special show. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
I know you had to travel to get here, so thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Beautiful day for a ride.
Yes, and we're so excited because we have the Lincoln, the Constitution, and the Civil War exhibit opening.
Yes.
And you're our big opening celebration for that.
Wonderful.
So that's going to be really exciting. The exhibit is like some of the ones we've had before, that it's a traveling exhibit.
Yes.
It's many places. But this one focuses on Lincoln and his evolution as a president.
Yes.
Through the Constitution and looking at the Civil War and how he changed.
And it really focuses a lot on his struggle to make the war a greater thing.
Yes.
After years and years of this violence and this bloodshed, he's looking for the greater meaning, and this comes ultimately in the form of the Emancipation Proclamation. And he's struggling with all of these different issues, and the exhibit goes into great depth about it. It's a wonderful exhibit, and a serious feather in the cap of the Peoria Library to get this.
Well, thank you. Yes, we have been very fortunate because we just had the Civil Rights exhibit at Well. This has kind of been our year to focus on civil rights, with it being the 50th anniversary. We did our Peoria Reads book on the civil rights movement. We've had several exhibits, and this kind of ends our year, and we've been partnering with Bradley University on that. So this is our big grand finale to talk about civil rights. But you will actually be performing in our gallery from 2 to 4 p.m. on Saturday, June 7th. And I think this is the one that people want to bring all ages to.
Yes, this is a show I will be doing called Abraham Lincoln in Song. And what I did was I researched Lincoln's life. I spent about a year reading everything I could find about Abraham Lincoln. And I began to document specific instances in his life where there was examples of actual pieces of music tied to Lincoln. And he loved music. It's a big part of his life. So ultimately, I used music as this vehicle to explore Lincoln and his life and times. So for instance, at different points in his life, as a young man in southern Indiana, he works on a flatboat, goes down to New Orleans. This is the first time he sees slavery in all of its, questionable glory, and he is so appalled that it sets his mind against slavery, and he determines at this point this is something he will never be involved with. Well, I use an old flatboater's work song that Lincoln could very well have sung as a way to illustrate this time, and then also talk about some of these issues.
Right, and so this will be an opportunity for people to bring children to educate themselves. If you're not into heavy history and aren't going to read a book this thick about Lincoln, this is a very, very accessible way.
Exactly.
See this exhibit with the big pictures and the explanations of the captions. It'll be like our other exhibit we had, that people were just fascinated with the photography and the way things are explained. But then you'll be there to talk about it in song too.
And I'll kind of create this context that'll give some background about the time that Lincoln grew up in and the things he went through and how all of these things affected him. And it's very family friendly. We'll get everybody to join in on a couple of things at different times. And there will be some interesting instruments to see. There will be some songs people will know. There will be some songs people will never have heard before.
Yeah, brand new.
But it's a very enjoyable way to come and learn about Lincoln and then also see the exhibit.
Right. And of course, people can take it home with them too. We've got here on the TV and a copy here. We've actually got your CD. Tell me about this. How did this come to be?
Well, this is the music from the show. And in 2008, I began recording this music. It was originally written to celebrate Lincoln's bicentennial. That's what was the impetus to create this show. And I had performed the show enough times that I had constant requests for, do you have a CD of this music? So ultimately, I went ahead and began the process of recording it all. I do most of my recording in my own studio, and then I go to a studio down in southern Indiana and bring up musicians from Nashville to do the overtracks and the additional instruments that I don't play myself. So it took about 5 or 6 months. We released it. I believe we actually released it on Lincoln's birthday.
Oh.
And it went to number 10 on Billboard's Bluegrass chart that first week.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that was quite an accomplishment.
That
and now, as
wonderful.
I always say, I'm sure it had more to do with Abraham Lincoln than Chris Vallillo, but I was delighted to get either way.
Yeah, you don't know. It's a wonderful accomplishment. Okay, well, I think that you said you were willing to maybe share a little music with us.
We were talking about some of the unusual instruments that I'm going to share with you. One of the things I found when I studied Lincoln's life was that, of course, he loved music of all kinds, but he was also a musician, and I didn't know this.
I didn't know that either.
And he didn't play the guitar, he didn't play a lot of instruments, he played that thing.
Ah, okay.
Now, this is an old-time instrument. Most folks think of this. You know what the name is?
It's a Jaws harp?
Jaw harp is one of them. They call it a Jew's harp, jaw harp, mouth harp, frog fiddle, Snoopy harp, Arkansas harp, Grugall, Geegall, Droomblah, and Trump.
Ah, I never knew all those names.
And Lincoln used to carry one of these when he was a circuit riding lawyer. Kept it in his bag at night. And of course, they didn't have televisions or entertainments to go to. They were staying in these little roadhouses and taverns. Well, all the lawyers would get together and they would make music. And Lincoln's buddy is a banjo player, and Lincoln breaks out the jaw harp, and you know. You can make pretty darn good music with that little thing without too much trouble. Yeah, we'll use that one. It's a little bit louder.
Okay.
Now, Abraham would have paid a penny apiece. And by the way, he was always called Abraham, never Abe in his lifetime. He'd have paid a penny apiece. Last time I bought one at a music store, I gave $7.
Wow.
So at some point in the show, I'm talking about the time Lincoln is a traveling lawyer. And as I researched, I found a wonderful wealth of information through Carl Sandburg, of course, who documented much of Lincoln's life. And he has a song documented that Lincoln played on the Jew's harp as a lawyer traveling around. And it's a song called Who's and Johnny. So I'll give you a little taste of that right now. An actual song Lincoln used to play on the instrument he used to play it on. Now the little black bull come down the meadow, who's and Johnny, who's and Johnny. That little black bull come down the meadow a long time ago, long time ago, long time ago. That little black bull come down the meadow a long time ago. Now first he stomp and then he beller, who's and Johnny, who's and Johnny. First he stomp and then he beller, long time ago, long time ago, long time ago. First he stomp and then he beller, long time ago. Now he wet his horn on a white oak sapling, who's and Johnny, who's and Johnny. He wet his horn on a white oak sapling long time ago, long time ago, long time ago. He wet his horn on a white oak sapling long time ago. So there you go.
Yeah. Now, do we know if Abraham sang, or did his friend with a banjo do the singing?
The references that I have found is that Lincoln, as a young man, would sing, and he had an enthusiastic, shall we say, voice, but not a beautiful voice.
Okay.
Very reedy. He had a high-pitched voice. But as he became a public figure in his life, past the point of being a lawyer, once he became a politician, he will never, ever perform again. He will, even requested by performers he has in the White House, he will always refrain from performing again. Okay. But he did sing when he was young.
Okay. That's interesting.
And I should point out, I was easy on you. Normally I make the audience sing. So I thought about it.
Not happening.
But I thought, no, live television, this could be bad.
Don't know the words to that one. Well, you yourself have a very long history with music.
Yes.
And have been performing and performed with many people. Tell me a little bit about where all that comes from. Where did you start off? Because I don't think you started life as a musician.
No. As we talked a little earlier, my original career was as an archaeologist. And I got to West Central Illinois working as a staff archaeologist at Western Illinois University. And I did that for about 3 years, but it was difficult. The work was erratic. The pay was miserable.
Yeah.
The future was not bright, and to succeed, I would have had to done another 6 years of school and become a PhD. And I determined that I didn't want to be an academician. I wanted to be the guy out there in the dirt, you know. Well, that's not what happens to professional archaeologists. They become, you know, in charge of the digs and such. So I gave that up and became a musician. And after a couple of years of struggling, I actually joined a band called the Cadillac Cowboys, Ken Carlisle and the Cadillac Cowboys, and we toured all around the Midwest. We were doing country rock and classic country with rock and roll arrangements, and that fell apart about 1983, and then at that point I started playing as a soloist. Well, in 1986, the thing happened that completely changed my life. Since I had a background in archaeology, I was hired to do music documenting, folklore in rural Illinois. So all of a sudden, I'm interviewing the oldest people still alive in the 1980s. We're talking about people born in the 1880s and 1890s, before television and radio and recorded music. And it just opened up my whole world to this historic music. And it combined that love of history, which I'd always had, with my love of music, which I'd always had. And suddenly, these two things came together, and that's been the direction I've worked in ever since.
And that's how we got to here.
That's how we got to here. This was, you know, 20 years down the road, but, you know, working with these old songs really opened up the windows into the past for me. And I think an old song can give you a sense of history in a way that a story can't or a book can't, because the rhythms and the melodies reflect the times. Because, for instance, we talked about a flatboater's work song earlier. This is a slow, kind of a almost droning kind of a rhythm that they used, but they would also work to that rhythm. And it gives you a sense of the reality of that time in a much deeper way.
Well, it's the same thing is true of like whaling songs or
Exactly.
whatever. We don't think about that now. I'm not real sure that there's anybody anywhere that's singing as a group to accomplish a task these days.
No, there are demonstrations.
They're all listening to the radio, or
at least not in this country.
Or Pandora with their with their earbuds in. Yeah. And so you record these things too, right?
Yes. I'm basically an independent musician and have been for 30 years now. And to survive as an independent musician, you need to amass a whole bunch of skills. You know, I'm the publicist, I'm the booking agent, I'm also the producer of the CDs, the recording engineer. But I've also gotten very good to the point where I can record a CD like this one for about a third of what it's going to cost you to go to Chicago or Nashville or even Peoria to record. And I'm also good enough at it now that I can make much better decisions and get a product that reflects what I'm looking for rather than what someone is trying to have me do.
Yeah, somebody else is imposing their creative vision on you, whereas you have your own vision.
Yeah, and it can be a very enjoyable way to make music and record.
Right, right. Well, I think that you had said perhaps you would tell us about this little object.
This is an interesting little artifact. It is the sawed-off top of a bottle of French Merlot.
Oh,
and
I hope you drank it.
Of course I did. And then I waited before I cut the bottle. And I use this, I put it on my little finger, and I'm going to use it to play an old-fashioned style of guitar playing called Bottleneck slide guitar.
Okay.
Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, Bottleneck slide is not historic to the Civil War.
Okay.
But it is a very emotional way to play music. It actually evolves out of a slave instrument called the diddley stick, which is a simple one-stringed instrument that slaves played, sliding a bottle or the backside of a jackknife up a single string to change the pitch. Well, by 1880, they've started to do that with guitars. And the musicians that make this music travel all across the country on steamboats because they work as deckhands and roustabouts. So they're going to come to a town like Peoria on a steamboat.
Yeah,
they're
we
going
got
to
a lot of
unload the
those.
boat. They're going to hang out on the levee. They're going to break out their instruments, and they're going to start to use this sawed-off bottle to play guitar. And people hear that new slide sound, and they just fall in love with the sound. And all around the country, people are copying this sound. It travels to Hawaii. It comes back in the 1920s in the form of the Hawaiian music craze. The blues musicians take it over, and it's this incredible way to play guitar. It's very emotive, so I use it a number of times in the show. And I open up the show with a beautiful piece of music. I'll do a short version of it here. Written in Chicago in direct response to a speech Lincoln gives on July the 2nd, 1862. It's the first time he asks for 300,000 troops to serve for 3 years. And a man named George F. Root is inspired by Lincoln and decides he's going to write a piece of music. And he writes a song called The Battle Cry of Freedom. And it becomes one of the most important in the Civil War. Now, it was written a lot faster than I'll play it for you, but I tend to play it in a more slow, kind of emotive style, looking back at the Civil War and seeing it as a huge national tragedy.
Right.
But one of the most beautiful melodies I think I've ever heard. So this is Battle Cry of Freedom.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
You bet.
And do you ever sing it?
I don't actually sing that. Normally I just do it as the instrumental. Of course, I'll sing in many of the songs on the show, but not that particular one.
What do you get out of lyrics of these historic songs? What do they mean to you?
Oh, so many of those songs are still poignant and touching today. I mean, music changes stylistically, but the themes that it touches on are universal and timeless. In the show, I'll do this wide range of different material. Some of it is some of the humorous stuff that Lincoln liked, but some of it is quite touching. I'll do a song called We Are Coming, Father Abram, at the Civil War part of the story. And it was another of the songs written in direct response to that same speech I just spoke of. But this is the first time you hear the personal element of the country reaching back to Lincoln with this Father Abram reference. And you can really sense the intensity of the time. And the meanings of the lyrics are very, very direct and very moving, especially in context like in association with an exhibit like this. It really kind of, the two things work together to make a greater sum.
Yeah, cool. And one of the things we're working on is for our exhibit is we're going to bring the personal touch of Peoria into this. We've had one of our really wonderful reference librarians, Chris Ferris, has been researching and pulling newspaper articles, and they are going to be enlarged and hung on our, because the exhibit just goes down the middle of the gallery, got to have something on the walls.
Sure.
So we are going to have what was actually happening in Peoria, what people were writing as editorials, what people were writing in the Democratic newspaper. And
well, I bet they said some nasty things about Lincoln.
They did.
Yes.
They did. Peoria had a lot of copperheads, and there was a lot of tension in the city, a lot of disagreement, a lot of fist fights, I think.
Oh, I'm sure.
And while, of course, Illinois was, Union, that doesn't mean everybody who lived here was all behind Abraham Lincoln.
And the very subject this exhibit is talking about, the Emancipation Proclamation, this is incredibly divisive. Yes. Because while on one hand, as you just mentioned, a lot of these people are pro-union and they might even be abolitionists, it's a whole different thing when you talk about actually freeing all these slaves. And then all of a sudden the dynamic shifts. And this was an incredibly controversial thing that Lincoln does.
Yes.
And it's always fascinating to see the local aspect brought into the picture.
What was happening. And I think the Peoria Historical Society is loaning us some items from the eras for
wonderful.
People just to kind of set the stage. And so it's while this exhibit has been many places, in fact, it was just in Princeton recently, our exhibit will have the extra things of, what happened in Peoria.
I think that's so important because it puts it into context locally.
What was it like to be in Peoria during the Civil War?
Yeah, and that's the exciting thing about an exhibit like this. It doesn't just read you the facts, it kind of puts the whole story into context. I got to work with the Smithsonian Institution a couple of times, working with a traveling exhibit on roots music, which is all of the old kinds of music that our heritage is made up of. And one of the aspects was just like this. Each time the exhibit came to a town, they had to do a local component.
Yes.
And that was always the best part of the exhibit because then it ties everything into things that everybody knew. And, Uncle Charlie playing the old-time fiddle, or whatever that local memory might be.
Yeah. Well, and this is so nice because, Lincoln practiced law right here.
Sure.
We have Metamora Courthouse, which has been restored to, Lincoln would have no problem walking in there and knowing looks exactly the same as it did during his day, and the wonderful statue out in the square. So it's really bringing him home. And while this has traveled nationwide, and we're so lucky to have all the Lincoln things here, it's so nice to bring it back and have it localized to Peoria and localized to
people rarely appreciate their local history.
Yeah,
but anything that happened in the country happened in Peoria.
It did.
And it affected people here just as much as anywhere else. And I think it's important to put it all back into context locally.
Yeah. We're going to have, in addition to your wonderful musical program, which I'll remind people is on Saturday, June 7th at 2 in the gallery at Main Library, and it's free and it's for all ages. We have 2 more speakers, more scholarly subjects, which children may not enjoy very much. One's Lincoln's Ladder to the Presidency, which is a local lawyer who is actually practicing in the same circuit Lincoln did and knows inside and out, and has written a book, and he will be talking about the changes, as he went on. And we also have another, Randy Saxton, who's a local retired pastor, who has studied Lincoln in depth, and he's going to be talking about a lot of the moral implications for Lincoln as he grew and evolved and changed.
Yeah, and while he was never a overtly religious man, he was a deeply spiritual man.
Yes.
And that was a very big part of his personal struggle in dealing with the war and coming to the conclusion that he had to release the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah, he had to. And there's a lot of interesting things about that. That, of course, at the library, we have all the reference material you could possibly want to find out about it, and all of our databases and maps, and can follow all this stuff. But this is one of those things that, they say there's no cure for curiosity, but...
Well, I can speak... I probably read 35 books to put together this show, and then at the Lincoln Bicentennial, easily 200 to 300 more were published on the man.
Oh, yes.
The wealth of information out there is incredibly deep and very rewarding. I mean, he's a fascinating human figure and historical figure.
Yeah. Peoria Public Library owns a telegraph, that Abraham Lincoln wrote a note on. Somebody sent him that message. He wrote a note on it and signed it. And somewhere in the distant past, it was donated to the library.
Wow.
And it has no relevance to Peoria. It's just something somebody collected.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line and had it. So I'm not sure if we'll have that on display or
but
not.
It's
possibly.
Really it's very moving to see an item like that where this man has actually
Abraham
physically
Lincoln
used it.
touched this.
Yeah.
That's his signature. He wrote this. This is something he thought about. It has to do with assigning somebody to a different military unit or something.
Sure.
I don't know. Something obscure, but day-to-day work of Abraham Lincoln during the war. Yeah. I want to remind people a little bit. We're going to have you take us out in song here in a couple minutes. But remind people that this exhibit is called Lincoln, the Constitution and the Civil War, and it will arrive May 28th, and it will be here through July 11th at Main Library in the gallery. And of course, we are open Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you want to arrange for a group, you can call and we'll make group tour arrangements. But our very, very special days are on Saturdays. We have you on June 7th at 2 p.m. You're going to come and play this wonderful musical Abraham Lincoln in song and really shed some light on the exhibit. But then we'll also have Guy Fraker with Lincoln's Ladder to the Presidency. Mm-hmm. And then we're also going to have Randy Saxon talking about the moral components and decisions that Lincoln made. And
it's actually a great opportunity to come to all the programs and pick up a greater depth of knowledge about this man.
Exactly.
That has been such an important part of our American
history. Take advantage. It's summer. It's a great chance to just spend an hour on those Saturdays and learn so much more than you ever possibly knew. And of course, I should remind people, all of this is on our website, peoriapubliclibrary.org, if you need to check on your times and that kind of thing. But along with all the other programs we have going on, are a wonderful, wonderful way to learn about Lincoln and some things you might not have thought about before.
You bet.
But why don't you send us off with a song?
Let me do another instrumental for you here to take us out. And I will do a song that is a Stephen Foster song. It's part of the show, and it's one of Lincoln's favorite songs as well. As the war drags on, the nation is struggling, there's no end in sight, and there's just abundance of exhaustion that has overcome the nation. And this song becomes an important piece of music to both sides, North and South. A wonderful song of Stephen Foster's called Hard Times Come Again No More.